They laughed. They always laughed. Every morning when Marco walked through the towering glass doors of Strathmore Industries, mop in one hand, cleaning cart in the other, a familiar chorus of snickers and side-eyes would follow him. To them, he was just the janitor, an immigrant with broken English, outdated clothes, and calloused hands. What could someone like him possibly understand about corporate success? They never stopped to ask why he worked the night shift and stayed through the morning, or why he carried an old, battered notebook in his pocket. No one cared to know his story, and yet, Marco walked those marble floors with quiet dignity, eyes fixed ahead, dreams tucked deep inside. But life has a funny way of humbling the arrogant and elevating the overlooked. Today, we're going to tell you what really happened when they laughed at the immigrant janitor, until one day. Marco Alvarez had arrived in the US 5 years earlier from Honduras. He left behind a country plagued with instability, poverty, and little opportunity. Back home, Marco had been a high school math teacher, deeply respected in his small town. But when his wife passed away unexpectedly, leaving him a single father, he made a painful choice: to start over in America, chasing the promise of a better life for his daughter, Sophia. The transition wasn't easy. His teaching credentials meant nothing here. Bills piled up. His English, though improving, was rough. So when the janitor job opened at Strathmore Industries, he swallowed his pride and took it. It was honest work, and it paid just enough to keep Sophia in school. Every evening, as the executives left their offices, Marco would begin his shift, scrubbing floors and emptying bins beneath the cold glow of fluorescent lights. But Marco wasn't content to simply survive. While others saw a dead-end job, he saw an opportunity to learn. Each night during his breaks, he'd pull out that old notebook, a relic from his teaching days, and take notes on business concepts, overheard conversations about market trends, and diagrams from abandoned whiteboards. Anything he could observe, he absorbed. He even started attending free online courses after his shifts, determined to understand this new world of finance and technology. Over time, Marco's notebook transformed into a treasure trove of ideas and insights. Yet still, to most of the staff, he remained invisible, or worse, a punchline. Junior analysts whispered behind his back. A few openly mocked him. "Professor, janitor," they'd sneer, seeing him scribble during breaks. But Marco endured with a quiet resilience. He knew something they didn't. Knowledge is power, and he was arming himself for a moment he couldn't yet foresee. Then came the crisis. One summer, Strathmore's stock plummeted after a disastrous product launch. The executive team scrambled for solutions, holding late-night strategy sessions. Tension hung thick in the air. One evening, as Marco polished the boardroom floors, he overheard a heated discussion about a supply chain issue. The executives had overlooked a critical market trend, one Marco had researched extensively in his spare time. For a moment he hesitated. Should he speak up? After all, who would take advice from the janitor? But seeing the desperation in their voices, he summoned his courage. Quietly, he offered a suggestion, referencing data he had compiled. The room fell silent. Skeptical at first, the executives reviewed his notes and were stunned. Not only was Marco correct, but his insights opened a pathway to recovery they hadn't considered. Overnight, perception began to shift. The man they once laughed at had just saved the company millions. Word spread quickly. No one laughed now. Executives who once ignored Marco now sought him out for ideas. Invitations to meetings followed. Eventually, the CEO offered him an official role in the strategy department, a leap from janitor to valued team member. But Marco remained grounded. His focus was always Sophia's future and using his newfound platform to inspire others. He often said, "What you do does not define who you are. What you learn and how you help others, that is who you are." Today, Marco's story serves as a powerful reminder. Never judge a person by their title, their accent, or their uniform. The potential to change the world can be found in the most unexpected places, and sometimes the ones you laugh at end up teaching you the greatest lessons of all. When Marco Alvarez first stepped into his new role in the strategy department, he couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. Just weeks ago, he was scrubbing these very floors. Now he sat in a glass-walled office, staring at a corporate badge that read, Business Strategy Associate. It was surreal. The same people who once avoided eye contact in the halls now greeted him with forced smiles or thinly veiled curiosity. Not everyone was pleased about his ascent. Some whispered behind his back, calling it a publicity stunt. But Marco paid them no mind. He hadn't asked for this opportunity. He had earned it. Still, adapting wasn't easy. Corporate jargon, complex systems, unspoken social dynamics. It was a new world with its own rules. Marco leaned on what had always carried him through: observation, resilience, and relentless learning. He worked twice as hard as his peers, arriving early and staying late, poring over reports and strategy decks. He kept his old notebook close, now filling it with insights from official meetings rather than overheard scraps. Meanwhile, Sophia beamed with pride. Her father's story had started to spread outside the company. A journalist caught wind of it and published an article titled, From Janitor to Strategist, One Immigrant's Unlikely Journey. It went viral. Suddenly, Marco was receiving messages from strangers, immigrants, janitors, dreamers, all saying the same thing. You give us hope. The attention was overwhelming, but Marco remained grounded. His mission wasn't to chase fame. It was to prove that opportunity, when met with preparation, can shatter any ceiling. With each passing month, Marco earned genuine respect from many inside Strathmore. His unique perspective, forged from years of quietly observing company dynamics, allowed him to spot inefficiencies others missed. He proposed small operational changes that saved time and money. He suggested new angles for market research. Slowly, the walls between him and the more seasoned strategists began to dissolve. But not everyone was ready to embrace this shift. Among the skeptics was Ethan Pierce, a senior executive with a penchant for elitism. Ethan had long believed that only Ivy League credentials belonged in the boardroom. To him, Marco's presence was an affront. He made snide remarks during meetings and tried to undermine Marco's ideas subtly. Marco noticed, but instead of retaliating, he focused on results. When one of Ethan's high-profile projects hit a snag, Marco quietly worked after hours to find a solution. Presenting it without seeking credit, he earned the CEO's direct praise in front of the entire team. Ethan was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Competence didn't wear a suit and tie. Outside the office, Marco used his growing platform to give back. He began mentoring night shift workers and janitorial staff, encouraging them to pursue education and embrace curiosity. I was where you are, he told them. If I can learn, so can you. The janitors, once invisible, began attending free workshops Marco organized during weekends, a movement that would soon ripple far beyond Strathmore's walls. Then came another challenge and another chance to rise. Strathmore was considering entering an emerging international market but lacked cultural insights. While seasoned strategists combed through dense reports, Marco approached the problem differently. He reached out to immigrant communities in the city, gathering first-hand knowledge about consumer habits, preferences, and needs. During a pivotal strategy presentation, Marco confidently shared his findings. Instead of slides packed with data, he told human stories of families, shop owners, and everyday people shaping this new market. The room was captivated. The CEO leaned forward. "This is the edge we've been missing," she said. Marco's storytelling approach sparked a shift in company culture. Soon, Strathmore began incorporating on-the-ground insights into their strategies, valuing perspectives once considered irrelevant. Marco was promoted again, this time to Director of Market Intelligence. Yet, through it all, he never let go of his core values. He still greeted the janitorial staff by name. He still kept that battered notebook, now a symbol of how far curiosity and humility can take you. And every Friday evening, he still led workshops for staff members eager to learn, fostering a culture of growth and inclusion. As Strathmore's international expansion succeeded beyond expectations, the company publicly credited Marco's contributions. Invitations to conferences and speaking engagements followed. At first reluctant, Marco soon recognized the opportunity to amplify his message, that brilliance exists in every corner of every organization waiting to be seen. At a major business forum, Marco took the stage in front of CEOs, investors, and global media. He shared his story, not to boast, but to challenge perceptions. "We all wear uniforms," he said, "but none of them define our worth." His speech went viral, inspiring companies worldwide to rethink talent and inclusion. Back at Strathmore, Marco championed new initiatives, mentorship programs, skills training for non-executive staff, leadership opportunities for underrepresented employees. The culture of elitism slowly gave way to one of empowerment. Ethan, Pierce, now humbled, approached Marco one day. "I was wrong about you," he admitted. Marco smiled. "That's okay. We all grow in our own time." Even as his influence grew, Marco remained devoted to Sophia, who had just been accepted to a prestigious university. At her graduation dinner, she hugged her father tightly. "You taught me that no dream is too big," she whispered. Marco blinked back tears. For him, that was the greatest victory of all. Years later, Marco Alvarez's story became part of corporate legend, not as a fairy tale, but as a blueprint. His journey reshaped Strathmore's values, proving that potential knows no rank, no accent, no background. He continued to mentor rising talent, always starting his sessions the same way, by holding up his old notebook. "This is where it began," he'd say. Not with privilege, not with power, with curiosity. He often reminded others that he hadn't changed. The world had simply caught up to what he'd always known. Dignity and intellect belonged to everyone. Marco's influence extended beyond business. Educational institutions invited him to speak. He funded scholarships for immigrant students, and he authored a best-selling book titled From Mop to Market: Lessons in Leadership and Humility. Yet for all the accolades, Marco found joy in the simple things. Sunday walks with Sophia, conversations with janitors still working the night shift, and handwritten notes from those he'd inspired. And in the quiet moments, he would reflect on how far he'd come. From the man laughed at by strangers to the man whose voice now resonated across boardrooms and beyond. A man who proved that no one should ever be underestimated. Because sometimes the person you laugh at today might just lead you tomorrow. As the years passed, Marco Alvarez became more than a corporate success story. He became a symbol of resilience and possibility. Invitations flooded in from around the world. Global summits, university commencements, leadership retreats. His voice carried weight not because of celebrity, but because it spoke to something universal: the power of perseverance, humility, and learning. Yet fame was never his goal. He often reminded people, "I am still that same man who mopped floors at night. The only difference now is that more people are listening." Strathmore continued to evolve under his influence. The company's mentorship programs expanded, employee engagement soared, and innovation flourished. Marco's approach to leadership was unorthodox. He believed in listening more than speaking, and in treating every voice as valuable. Junior staff members were encouraged to share ideas. Career pathways opened for those previously overlooked. One day, during a leadership retreat, Marco surprised everyone by inviting members of the janitorial staff to present their ideas on improving company workflow. Many executives were skeptical, until one janitor proposed a new system that ultimately saved the company thousands of dollars per month. The message was clear. Wisdom and insight are not confined to titles, but as his profile rose, so did the demands on his time. Marco struggled to balance public engagements with his personal life. Sophia noticed her father's exhaustion. One evening, over dinner, she said gently, "Papa, don't forget why you started." Her words grounded him. Marco realized that to stay true to his values, he needed to choose quality over quantity, to use his voice purposefully, not endlessly. With this renewed clarity, Marco became more selective about his engagements. He focused on platforms that aligned with his mission, promoting education, immigrant empowerment, and inclusive leadership. He also partnered with global NGOs to support educational initiatives for disadvantaged youth, funding programs in both the US and Honduras. At Strathmore, his influence continued to deepen. The Marco Alvarez Leadership Academy was established, offering scholarships and development programs for underrepresented employees. Marco personally mentored each cohort, beginning every session by sharing the story of his first days as a janitor. Meanwhile, his relationship with Ethan Pierce had transformed. Once an adversary, Ethan had become one of Marco's strongest allies. Together, they co-led workshops on cultural humility and leadership, using their own journey as a case study in growth and understanding. During one such workshop, a young employee asked Marco, "Do you ever regret those years as a janitor?" Marco smiled. "Not for a second," he replied. "Those years taught me more about people, about dignity, and about strength than any business degree ever could. The mop was my first leadership tool. It taught me that no job is beneath you, and no dream is beyond you." His words resonated deeply. Across industries, companies began to rethink how they nurtured talent and how they valued diverse experiences. Marco's story wasn't just inspiring, it was driving tangible change. But no path is without obstacles. As Marco's influence grew, so did resentment in certain circles. Some traditional leaders felt threatened by this new wave of inclusive leadership. Anonymous critics online dismissed his story as corporate propaganda. Media scrutiny intensified, digging into his past, questioning every move. Marco faced these challenges with characteristic grace. "When you rise," he often told his mentees, "some will try to pull you down. That is their battle, not yours. Stay focused on what matters." He leaned on his community, Sophia, his closest colleagues, and a growing circle of allies who believed in the same mission. Publicly, he addressed the criticism head-on. "I am not perfect. I have never claimed to be. But if my story helps one person believe in their worth, then it is worth telling, imperfections and all." The criticism gradually faded, drowned out by the continued impact of his work. At an international leadership conference, Marco delivered one of his most memorable talks. He spoke not of titles or success, but of unseen potential. Somewhere, right now, a janitor is solving a problem no executive can see. Somewhere, a migrant is building knowledge in the shadows. If we only judge by what we see, we will miss the brilliance that could change our world. The audience rose in applause. It was a message the world needed to hear, and one Marco would never tire of repeating. As the decade came to a close, Marco began thinking about legacy, not in terms of personal accolades, but in creating structures that would outlast him. He founded the Alvarez Foundation, dedicated to empowering immigrants through education, mentorship, and leadership training. The foundation's flagship program, From Janitor to Leader, offered scholarships, skills workshops, and mentorship to hundreds of participants each year. Many alumni of the program went on to leadership roles in diverse industries, carrying forward the values Marco championed. At Strathmore, Marco transitioned to an advisory role, making space for new voices. His farewell speech to the staff was simple and heartfelt. "This is not goodbye," he said. "This is a new beginning for all of us. Remember, brilliance is everywhere. Your job is to see it." Even in semi-retirement, Marco remained active. He continued writing, mentoring, and speaking. His book became required reading in leadership courses at top universities. Sophia, now a successful advocate for immigrant rights, often spoke alongside her father, bringing their shared message to new audiences. One of Marco's proudest moments came when a young man approached him after a talk. He'd been a janitor, inspired by Marco's story, and was now leading a team of engineers. Tears in his eyes, he said, "You showed me what was possible." Marco embraced him. "That is why we tell these stories," he said softly, "so no one forgets what is possible." Today, Marco Alvarez's name is known in boardrooms, classrooms, and community centers worldwide, not as a corporate icon, but as a beacon of possibility. His journey from janitor to strategist to global voice continues to inspire millions. Yet, if you were to visit his home, you wouldn't find walls lined with awards. You'd find photos of Sophia, shelves of books, and, on his desk, the same battered notebook where it all began. In quiet moments, Marco still reflects on the path he walked. He often returns to Strathmore not for meetings, but to greet the janitors, the security guards, the night shift workers. "I see you," he tells them. "I know your worth." And perhaps that is the true legacy of Marco Alvarez, a reminder that greatness can rise from anywhere, that dignity belongs to all, and that the smallest voice can echo across the world when spoken with truth and courage. So the next time you catch yourself judging someone by their title, their accent, or their uniform, remember Marco, because sometimes the ones they laugh at today become the ones who lead us all tomorrow.